But the truth is, it takes loads of time and you cannot change everything at once. So one of the things I say in the book, there are some signs that you can listen to that show that something's wrong. But what I say is, don't try changing everything at once. You cannot. You simply will fail if you try. Don't try lecturing people. People hate being lectured. But try doing something today, even if it's small, and then help the others see what you're seeing. That leads to a conversation that you can try out things. And you need still to swallow something, say, I don't like how it is, but I'm going to do that because I'm doing something else here that I maybe can get some of the cards that I don't have. So,
hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jason Knight, and on each episode of this podcast, I'll be having conversations with the brightest and best minds I can find to help inspire all of us to make amazing products, amazing product teams, and amazing product companies. Now, if you like the sound of that, why not head over to onenightinproduct.com where you can sign up for the newsletter, check out some of my other episodes with thought leaders and practitioners, and find the podcast on your favourite podcast app or YouTube. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can make sure you never miss another episode again. And do make sure to tell your friends while you're at it. On tonight's episode, we talk all about bullshit management, some of the traps that product teams fall into and who trap them there, how to start to change things in the face of adversity, when not to die on a hill, and how to get from coordinative to collaborative flow. For all this and much more, stick with us on One Night in Product. So tonight my returning guest is David Pereira. Dave is a keen musician, guitar player, long-time blogger, editor, newsletter writer, and now published book author, who once told me his biggest fear is to be outdated in his industry. Luckily, since we last spoke on the podcast, there have been absolutely zero developments that might put us all at risk of obsolescence. David's doing his best, though, to stay top of mind with his new book, Untrapping Product Teams, where he hopes to help rid the world of bullshit management. I think he's got his work cut out, though, because I have to say, the smell recently has been terrible. Hi, David. Welcome back, and how are you tonight?
Thank you for getting me back here. I'm doing great.
And how's the book launch gone so far? We'll talk a bit more about the book at the moment, but you're right in the middle of it at the moment. So how stressful or how kind of zen are you at the moment with the kind of the actual launch of the book that you've got going on now?
It's doing quite well. So I'm receiving good feedback, resonance from readers, dropping me a message. Hey, I read chapter 1. I'm already trying this. I read chapter 2. That's quite interesting, and so on. And of course, I get a little bit anxious. I open Amazon and all the place. Is there a review? Is there something happening? Or what are people talking about it? But it's doing quite well. I'm surprised with the resonance so far.
Well, that's the thing. I guess you've already got some reviews, and I don't think the book's actually technically out till tomorrow. So I don't know if those are like early reviewers that are giving you reviews already, or if Amazon have done what they did for me with other books and just started to deliver them before you even expect them to be delivered. But, either way, all good feedback, or even any feedback's good feedback, right?
Yeah, and feedback's good feedback. And what happened is we released the Kindle version before, so that's why I got some reviews. And the printed version goes out soon.
There you go. Well, I understand that even you haven't got the printed version yet. So, if anyone's got that already, you're ahead of the author. But the book, Untrapping Product Teams, now, I've had a quick read of the electronic version. There's lots of great stuff in there. I think it's fair to say it covers quite a lot of different topics around product management and how to do it well. But if you had to distill the book down to its purest essence, like the fundamentals, what's the core value proposition of the book, and who should be reading it?
Who should be reading? Product managers, I would start with. They are the core
So
audience.
Individual contributors is what we're saying?
Yes, individual contributors. And the core essence boils down to story of my life. I would arrive in a company and I would not understand what I should pay attention to. And very quickly, I would realize I was doing anything but product management. Sometimes because I was ill-equipped, sometimes because I lacked a coach to help me with that. So this book is about helping people understand reality. So what should you look at? And when you see some things, what should you be doing? And how do you ensure you are there? So it's about helping product people, product managers, and so on, deliver value. So I wrote from product manager perspective. More people could benefit from that. Agile coach and so on, individual contributors, and probably some founders. But the idea is, how do we drive value when almost everyone distracts us from it?
Well, I think one of the things you might consider there is that in some cases, some of those people, potentially the founders or the leaders within the organization, might be some of the people that are distracting from the value, right? But I guess it's an interesting point. like, do you think that there is enough in here and that it goes into things at the sufficient kind of Zoom level or whatever to actually resonate with people that maybe aren't into this world, like the founder that's all about the sales and the numbers? Like, do you think that founder picks this book up and's like, yeah, okay, got it? Or do you think that they need to read a different book and this one is the one that helps the individual contributors kind of go from the bottom up?
For founders, they would get value from the third part the most, which is what I call remaining on track, because I give them loads of health check. So they could say, what are we doing here? Are we here, right or left? And then understanding the key elements. And if they would be curious to learn what is the meaning behind it, they could find some things to do. And the individual contributors, they could have ammunition to have a conversation. So it's all about bringing perspective. One of the things of the book, I say I give loads of perspective and I help you do something about it. But I don't own the truth. There are multiple ways of doing product. And I know a few ways and I shared what I know to work and what I know to not work because I made several mistakes. So I shared them.
Yeah, but do you think, though, that the individual contributor in a company that's making all of those mistakes, because it's generally, I mean, obviously, sometimes it's the individual contributor that's making the mistakes themselves and they could be coached or trained to fix that in an organization that wants to do it properly. But a lot of times that they're making those mistakes or having those sort of issues, it's because the organization itself isn't really working as an entity. So do you think that the individual contributor can have a part to play in kind of changing that rather than just trying to change that but getting frustrated because they can't move the entire organization with their own sort of back muscles?
That's a very fair question. What I believe is some things I have seen in my life. When someone starts doing something differently and delivering value, more people get curious. What is this person doing differently? And then start inspiring the other. But the truth is, it takes loads of time and you cannot change everything at once. So, one of the things I say in the book, there are some signs that you can listen to that show that something's wrong. But what I say is, don't try changing everything at once. You cannot. You simply will fail if you try. Don't try lecturing people. People hate being lectured. But try doing something today, even if it's small, and then help the other see what you're seeing. That leads to a conversation that you can try out things. And you need still to swallow something, saying, I don't like how it is, but I'm going to do that because I'm doing something else here that I maybe can get some of the cards that I don't have. So that's how I see individual contributors change: doing, inspiring, and learning.
No, absolutely. Well, we'll talk a lot more about that as we kind of explore some of the themes of the book. But I want to, point out that you've got quite a lot of experience writing. You've been blogging and newslettering and link pinning over the years, and you're obviously passionate about advancing the craft of product management. And we've spoken about that before as well. We've also spoken about your work with Scrum and some of the things that you're trying to do around that as well. But in any case, even for a passionate author, writing a book is a pretty big undertaking. So what was it that made you decide that it was, time to write a book and actually put that effort in to get something out there?
It's quite interesting because the truth is, I didn't want to write a book. I was saying maybe the world needs something different now. People are consuming videos, they want something sharper. They search for a problem, they find something here, like in a blog post and so on. Maybe I don't even write a book about it. So I was just running away from it. Some people would ask me, when is the book coming out? You are blogging and so on. And I would say, I'm not thinking about it. But then eventually I started getting interested about it because I read some books and I said, I'm a heavy book reader. You can see here behind my shelves, and I'm always reading. And I was getting excited and learning and learning. And I said, maybe the book is a way of getting closer to the author. Maybe it's a way of stepping back and reflecting more. But I said, I don't want to commit to this mountain of work ahead of me. I simply don't have the time. But what motivated me was one talk that happened in Munich at a product team. So I have been giving some keynotes here and there and so on. And then I gave one keynote, which I called as Untrapping Product Teams. And it was in person, after this COVID and everything, we started coming back and so on. And once I gave that talk in person, there were around 60 people, not that much. But the energy was very strong when I presented what I called as a coordinative development flow and collaborative and so on. And then people started connecting to that. And there was a line of 10 people after the talk who wanted to talk to me. And then out of these 10 people, 7 asked me, what about the book? What about the book? And that
That's
gave
just the
me
same as
such
customer feedback, though, like feature requests. It's just feature requests, right?
Yeah, that was a feature request. And then I said, okay, let not me go all in writing a book because of this. Then I used Product Discover to write my book. And honestly, I was trying to find reasons not to write it. I said, okay, I will do this experiment, and of course it's going to fail. Because inside me, I wanted the experiment to fail, then I could go back to my blogging and other things. It didn't fail. I started getting some more signs that maybe people want to learn more about traps, how to deal with reality, how to do this, and so on and so on. And I said, all right, let me give it a try.
Well, fair enough, and it's obviously all come together, but you've also got some pretty heavyweight people like Marty Cagan providing testimonials within the book or quotes within the cover. So how much does it mean to you to get that kind of praise and that kind of validation from some heavyweights in the industry?
That meant a lot. So there were some phases, right? So what happened is I wanted to check if this book has any value. There are many books about product management. So I tried to find kind of a intersection between agile and product because I like both roads and I don't think they are separate roads. I think they can be good together. So I tried to find someone to read the book, give me a forward, but the forward was a validation show. So I got Ash Maurya, the creator of Link Canvas, Jim Highsmith, co-author of Agile Manifesto, and they helped me a lot. And that was giving me such a good feeling of, I said, these guys are kind of my idols. I have been referring to them all the time, Mike Cohen, Marty Cagan. And then Marty, I'm struggling to find someone who is more generous than him with time. Because I dropped him a message and he was very clear in the beginning. Hey, I'm finishing my book. I don't have time. But ping me by the end of the year again with something. And he was very clear. He said that I would have only one shot. I shared the manuscript and it's one shot and that's it. So I should share with something that I was ready with it. And then I approached him a little bit before Christmas and said, you got me in a nice time. I am available now. So a few days later, he said what he liked about the book. He said what he disliked about the book. And he said, based on what I hear and what I see, this is the quote. I can give it to you. But it meant a lot because it was honest. It was not fake. And he said points that I could improve in the book and so on. So I strived to do that. And it was like, is this really happening? Because for me, like Marty Cagan was someone in another world, like a star. Like for me, I like football. So for me, he's like a Messi. How can I talk to Messi? I simply don't talk to Messi. He is not going to talk to me. I'm nobody to him. And Marty Cagan is very generous and honest. So I appreciate a lot.
Well, he's certainly honest. But speaking of Marty, your book does tread some similar themes to his new book, Transformed, which I spoke to him about a few weeks back on the podcast. And obviously that book's got a lot of fans that have, already started to take to that and post good things about that. It's also got some critics as well, or certainly some of the interviews that he did afterwards have kind of pushed back on some of his points. But I guess the simple question is, you've got a book now, you personally, which is very much playing the same kind of ball game as Transformed. Like you're talking about making teams better, getting away from the old mentality, getting to the new mentality, doing product, quote unquote, properly. Does that mean then that your book is kind of complementary and it's something that kind of goes alongside Transformed, or is it kind of treading all of the same boards as Transformed? Should it be read by the same people? Like, how does it play with the other big one that's come out about doing similar stuff?
I listened to Transform recently, and I saw many similarities. He talks a lot about product principles. I also have a chapter there about product principles. And what I see is Marty elaborates really well on how product is done, and he gives many perspectives. I would see his book more on the organizational level. What does an organization need to do? So on the leadership level. Mine is a complementary one because I came more from product perspective, bottom up, and I share many stories. And mine is more sharing what doesn't work and why it doesn't work and what you could do differently. And for him, like is a transition and so on. I would believe they are complementary, and product managers could benefit from reading both. I wouldn't say like if you read only my book, you're just go ahead and you have everything. I bring perspective, and I think Marty Cagan will enrich the perspective. Both books are good, complementary. I wouldn't say if you read both books, you would say they're just the same. That would not be the case. I think you would gain different perspectives. Might be that some are even a little bit conflicting, can be the case. And I think there is always a case in product. It would be very unlikely everyone agrees on everything. But the core, what I see with Martin approach, it's about the mindset. It's not about the process. It is about the mindset of driving value and so on and empowering people.
You've mentioned a couple of times the fact that you've included some personal stories about problematic situations that you've been in the past. And we've all been in problematic situations in the past, obviously. So like, it's really good to get that open and honest take on things that have actually happened to you and sort of bring the personal touch to it as well. So how important was it for you to ground this book in that reality rather than it be just another kind of up in the clouds type ivory tower book? Was that something that you thought was really important from the start?
That was one of the aspects that inspired me to get to write this book. What I got from many people was, we find many books about product management, but many books relate to the A companies, the outstanding ones, the Google world, the Meta world, and all of this, which most of the mere mortal product managers like me haven't experienced that. And then some people say, you talk about the daily life of the poor product managers that are in a place trying to create a digital product, and big chance they are going to fail. But they cannot bring the A players. They lack the arguments to convince someone, the funds, or also the vision and so on. How do we deal with reality while still trying to make a living? So I thought, I've never worked for any of these companies, and my stories, they relate to the normal world that most people will experience somehow. So that's what was very important. And I did loads of beta reading with my book. In total, I got 5,000 feedback comments. And,
wow.
Yeah. I did 6 rounds and so on. So it was quite intensive. And if there was one thing that I had to add was stories. Some people would say, hey, this chapter is too theoretical. I'm missing your stories. And one of the things was, I'm missing your voice here. Just remove the theory, put his story here, and get a lesson out of the story. That's what I want to see more. And then I said, okay, now I need to keep remembering my stories. Not all stories are related to the last year. Some stories are related to a few years ago, and maybe even loads of years ago. So I had to talk to people and say, hey, what exactly happened there? Let me try remembering and so on. So it was quite interesting.
No, absolutely. And again, I think that personal touch is always very good. And one of the things I think that is really important these days, because there's so many people out there, either with books or just content in general, right? Everyone's basically talking about the same things, because I still remain convinced that there are not that many things to talk about, really. Like, we all kind of believe mainly the same stuff. So bringing kind of context and personality to it, I think, can be really helpful. But let's get down to brass tacks. You say that we're untrapping product teams, and you touched on it earlier, but what are they trapped in? And more importantly, or as importantly, who trapped them there?
So there are many types of traps. And let's start with who trapped them. Sometimes they trap themselves because of lack of knowledge. Sometimes the organization trapped themselves because they haven't seen other ways of working. I'm not blaming the organization. They just don't know another way of working, and they might be trying to create a product with a project mindset, for example. So these are some situations. But when I say kind of traps, there are loads. One of the examples I say is the art of doing bullshit management, which is something like you spend loads of time doing things that drain all of your energy, but create no value. And there is an equation behind, which is the more bullshit you handle, the less value you create. And what on earth am I talking about here? Sometimes you arrive in a place as a product manager, and then someone tells you you need to gather the requirements. And then you go there and they start asking stakeholders, hey, what are the requirements? And then you bloat the backlog full of requirements, full of things, but you don't even know why that is necessary. How do you know what success looks like? You may become very, very busy, but then you realize which value you created in the end of the day, and you cannot answer this question. That's a big trap, because you might not even know you are trapped. You may even be promoted if you do a good job with requirement gathering.
But that's funny though, because that then gets down to this kind of product owner, product manager type debate, which again, Marty was talking about. And I know that you've talked about it before as well, this idea that you kind of have this artificial divide, and that there's lots of people that are working in these companies that their entire job is to basically write down requirements and get them into a nice format for the engineering team to work on, or a nice format for the actual product manager to go and read and comment on or whatever. So where are you with sort of product owners and product managers these days, especially given your past work with the sort of the world of Scrum as well?
Yeah, that's a discussion that is always a tough one. So what I need to admit, I changed my perspective on this throughout the time. When I broke into product, I broke as a product owner. And there was a product owner, there was a product manager. And my perception before, the product owner is responsible for getting the things done right, and the product manager responsible to define what is the right thing to do. And I thought that worked until I realized it didn't. So after, yeah, I realized it didn't. And there was a game happening there. The product manager would blame me for poor execution, and I would blame her back for poor decision making. And there was a game, and no one would ever win on that. But that was my very first job as a product person, so to say. Nowadays, what I realize is very simple. Product manager is the job, and product owner is the role. Product manager is the best person to be the product owner. And in short, it doesn't matter that the name you decide to use. It should be one person with end-to-end responsibility, someone responsible for identifying what matters and leading that until the moment you create value. So it's end-to-end responsibility. And some people tell me, but that doesn't work, that doesn't fly. And I say, well, the other for sure doesn't fly, because then you fragment responsibility in a way that you diminish accountability.
But, you just said it yourself. There are people out there, and I've spoken to people out there that are like, oh no, absolutely. There's just too much to do for one person to do it. Like, you have to split it so that you've got the what to do and, how to do it or whatever, like the requirements writers and the strategic decision makers, if they get to do that sort of thing as well. It's just too big for one person. How would you respond to that kind of retort to that position that you have?
So it will be too big for one person if you try to feed the team. So for example, if you want to diminish software engineers to coders, where you tell them what they have to do, so for sure, you will become a bottleneck, because you need to think about solutions, you need to craft solutions, and you need to precisely tell them what to do. But if you treat them as smart people and creative ones, as they are, and you tell them, this is what we need to achieve, how do we get there, let's get it together, then you move away from this extensive backlog management to a collaboration, close collaboration, and problem solving. Then you will have time for the other things. What is very important is the size of the responsibility. It needs to be in a sizable manner that the product manager can be accountable for end-to-end. If you say to the product manager, you are responsible for our whole product, of course, that doesn't fly. You need to slice in a way that it makes sense.
No, absolutely. And kind of thinner slices, get people fully responsible for certain things, all the things that we all believe, but at the same time just seem to be quite alien to some companies. So, hopefully we can find ways to persuade them. But I do have to say, I do like a good swear word as much as the next person. But do you think that referring to things as bullshit management is going to win you any friends in the executive suite?
Sometimes you need to get people to be a little bit annoyed, and then they start listening.
Oh, I'm there with you already.
Yeah, because if you ask people, do you want to succeed? They say, yeah, of course. Next. They don't even engage in a conversation. Then if you start a little bit like this, hey, did you know you're doing bullshit management? And I say, what the heck are you talking about? I said, well, the decisions that you have been making is leading to the team to create waste. Let me show you some things here. And they start getting a bit annoyed with you. No one wants to say, hey, I'm not doing bullshit management. What are you talking about? At least they want to understand. And the reason for this for me is to go into a conversation. It's not a conflict. I want to show things. And I will take part of the blame. I will say, yeah, I have been contributing. Here's how I'm contributing. But I want to play a different game. I want to play a game where we drive value together. And I don't want to play this game here of doing bullshit management because it's not fun for anyone. And then I start naming, look at this. We do this, we get that. No value. Might be more features, but more features nobody cares about. Let's look what happened over the last 12 months. We created 100 features and there are 50 nobody's ever using. Do we want to keep doing that? Doesn't seem to make much sense to me. So I think we need to use some strong words sometimes so people listen. And that was one of the feedback I received from one director. Said, you are too peaceful, Dave. You need to be more bullish sometimes. You need to say what is on your mind. And then I look at him. I said, do you want to hear that? He said, yeah, I do. I said, I think we do loads of bullshit. And then he said, now you're talking. Tell me what is bullshit. And I said, all right. So sometimes you just need to speak honestly, but it's about using the BS word, but still being respectful, trying to help the company. It's not just complaining and ventilating. No, you are trying to drive value. You're still saying, what can I do today for a better tomorrow?
No, absolutely. Although I do note that you've not been confident enough to put that word on the cover of the book. So, you've still got some reticence. But, I agree with kind of tactical use of language. But yeah, again, I just wonder if everyone will look at it with the same light. But, maybe those are the ones that are victims of the most bullshit. So I guess we'll see. But you talk in the book about coordinative flow versus collaborative flow. And you mentioned it in passing earlier, like these two different ways that you believe that teams work. And I know what the words mean, but they kind of sound very technical. I don't really understand 100% what these mean in detail. So could you simplify it for an old guy like me? Like, what's the difference between coordinative flow, collaborative flow, and also what are most people doing these days in your experience?
In simple words, when you work in coordinative flows, it means you're going to spend loads of time talking about the work and little time doing the work, because you need to coordinate tasks with different people. And things take too long, many meetings, many things happening, and so on. And very important, when things go wrong, you know the one to blame, because it is someone on the line there that did something wrong. In a collaborative flow, it's the contrary. Instead of talking about the work, you use what you know to discover what you don't. So you start exploring the unknown. So it's more like, hey, let's not talk about the work. Let's do the work so we learn. We don't speculate. We move on and start learning. And when things go wrong, actually you learn fast enough so you can drop ideas that don't work, and then you pick the ones that work. So it's a very different way. That's why I say it's collaborative, because you are trying to understand what are the cards you have, what are the knowns, and what are the unknowns, and then you start stepping there and seeing how you do. So that's the summary of that.
And I'm guessing you're going to say that the majority of teams that are trapped in this bullshit that you were talking about are all working in that kind of coordinative fashion. What's stopping them from working collaboratively? I realize that could be that's a big question, but...
Yeah, that's a big question, and it's not something simple to say. But in general, I would say we are taught to color inside the lines. We do love processes, and that makes us feel safe. And as humans, there's something we hate. It's being exposed to risk. We feel uncomfortable to that. That's not natural to most of us. It doesn't come natural. So when we start being coordinative, it means we will have a process. You know who does what by when. You know who is responsible for what. So the process on paper looks beautiful. It gives us security. It seems it works until you realize it doesn't. But it will just take too long for you to realize that. And that's the reason I think it's our mindset. And the digital product is not something that old. If we start thinking how we are developing that, started with the internet, but it's still early stage. I would dare say, like, over the last decade, it's changed a lot how we work, and technology is empowering more. So now it is, how can we get comfortable with the uncomfortable? So it's being more, it's moving away from our brain wire, because now we are wired to play safe. That's how we are wired. But if we play safe, this case, actually we just pay the bill later, and it becomes very expensive. And one of the quotes I like the most, it comes from Alexander Osterwalder, the CEO of Strategizer, something along the lines: avoid big failures or you're dead. Embrace small failures or you're dead.
No, absolutely. And it just points to some of the mindset shifts that you probably need to push through. And again, whether individual contributors can do that or whether that needs kind of, well, it obviously needs broader change, but trying to demonstrate the value, I think, like you said earlier, and trying to get people at least curious can be a good first start. But one of the stories that you tell in the book is about helping others step back. And you tell a story about how you had a senior leader whose justification for doing something is just, I'm a senior manager, that's enough evidence. Now, I guarantee that's a conversation that's been had dozens of times today. It's something that pretty much everyone listening to this has probably been into, and maybe even some of them have used that justification themselves if they've had to. So it's a very common scenario faced by product people. Now, I've read the book, so I know what your advice is, or at least what you did, but what's your general advice in this sort of situation? So what approach to try and tackle that mindset?
When it comes to this kind of, I'm senior manager, that's why you should do it, of course the person feels mistrusted. The person feels like you're challenging the expertise. So you need to help the person step back. And there are a few things. For me, the very first thing is understanding what is the bet that you are going to make if you do what the person is asking you, and make it transparent. And the core aspect is to ask a question that leads to a no answer. Because, as I said, if you ask, do you want to succeed? Everyone say yes. But in this case, what is at risk? People like avoiding risk. So if you say, let's say we do that and it goes wrong, and then it is going to impact several hundred thousands of users. Is that what you want? Do you want to risk that? The answer is an immediate no, I don't want to risk that. No one wants to risk that. And then you can say, like, all right, but this is what is at risk. How can we reduce this? How can we mitigate this risk, for example? And then you can have a conversation. And most of the times the person will tell you, well, I have a strong feeling. And say, okay, a strong feeling, we can still test that in a different way, but let's not apply the change immediately. So it's about step back from the situation and try understanding what is the real bet here and the risk, and put on the table and have a conversation about this.
It reminds me of some conversations I've had with people about prioritization and you've got these numeric prioritization frameworks, which I have mixed feelings about, but you have people saying that I'm confident that this is the right thing to do, and that gets kind of added into the sums somehow. But then you realize that just some people are just way more confident about their opinions than others, and you almost have to calibrate for for their confidence. Like, is that something that you've seen in your career as well?
Yes. So it is about the strength of evidence. Someone said, yeah, I'm confident. And I said, what makes you confident? Well, I talked to my wife, and my wife talked to her friends, and all of them said they would use it. That's what drives my confidence. That's a very weak evidence and should not justify you doing that. So I think in terms of confidence, you need to understand what kind of evidence you have and rate it differently. Going back to the example of my book, I said I was searching for evidence not to write it. So my very first thing was, let me start writing a book. I open a Google Docs and I start writing a few sentences. I said, now I'm going to post on LinkedIn and say I'm writing a book, and I want to see how people interact with that. And I said, if I get less than 100 interactions, it means that people couldn't care less about me writing a book. It's not interesting for them. And if that happens, then maybe I will just pivot the idea or the angle and see if something resonates. But then my first interaction was like, there were several hundreds there. And I said, oh, people are interested in this direction here. Should I write a book right now with this interaction on LinkedIn? I said, of course not. What I did next was I put a survey out there. I'm writing a book. Do you want to know more about once it's out? Would you buy it? And I said, I need to get 500 people subscribed to this. And then I got more than 500, but I decided to interview some people, the skeptical ones and the others. So I started building evidence. So you see, first I just had engagement, low commitment. Then I increased the level of commitment. And then I said, now I want to get serious. I said, I'm going to write a chapter of my book, and I will call it as the Product Strategy Guide. And I will put in my newsletter, but I will only allow paid members to read. If they pay to read it, that's a huge commitment. And if they give me positive feedback after they read it and they remain as a paid subscriber, that means something. So it's how can you escalate the commitment and see the level of evidence? That's how you collect evidence in product also. If someone tells you it's one thing, how do you get them to show me the money?
Yeah, it's very interesting, that idea of just applying the principles of product management to writing a book, which is itself a product, right? But yeah. I guess not everyone thinks about it in those terms. But one of the things that you said in the book is that knowing when to enjoy the ride as a passenger and when to take the driver's seat is critical to defeating common challenges. Now, I guess there are two questions I could ask about that statement. So I'm going to do them one at a time. Firstly, and you kind of touched on it earlier, kind of, stole my thunder a little bit, but how much of affecting change within an organization is around maybe being patient, waiting until points where you can find leverage, find the right moments to make that change, and being prepared not to die on every single hill that you believe in?
My initial approach when I started seeing things wrong was to lecture everyone, point everything that was wrong and saying why it was wrong and how we should change. People panicked. They panicked. They said, no, that's not how we do business, and it's massive change. It will disrupt everything. No, we cannot do it. We cannot do it. What happened there, I was trying to be the driver on everything. I was saying, we lack a product strategy. We lack a vision. Our goals are very fluffy. We need to change it. How we set backlog items is too prescriptive. Our roadmaps are feature-oriented. So I loaded them with that. And what happened there is they still wanted to have their share of driving. And what I realized it happened is what is happening in your scenario and what is the smallest change you could drive within the role you have. So if you're a product manager and if you're trapped in this situation I have, most probably you can start asking one question. What is the assumption behind this feature? So you may assume users would pay for that. You may assume they would understand how to use it. And then you can say, how do we test this? So you start being the driver on this specific thing, identifying and testing critical assumptions. That's it. That's the only thing. And the other you accept because you need to select your fights. If you try picking all the fights, you're going to die on a hill and frustrated, demotivated, and so on. And the example I'm saying, a product manager going in assumption and testing and so on, you can win other cards because once you test, you can help the others see what you're seeing. Say, hey, I tested this with 10 users and here's the feedback I got. They don't understand how to use it. Look at this video here. Should we still pursue it? And then that leads to a conversation. Then you start gaining the experimentation card. Then sooner or later, people realize, actually, we should not have output-oriented roadmaps. Maybe we should have outcome. Then the team can explore with different features. Then you start changing. The thing is, it's anything but a sprint. It's a long marathon.
No, absolutely. Marginal gains is always the calling card of the person that's trying to transform an organization. Just almost make a backlog of the things that are the worst from your perspective and then try and make a case to change those things one at a time. Although obviously, as you put in the book, sometimes you just delete the whole backlog. So I don't know if we want to do that with our change backlogs as well. But the second part of my question is does everyone really need to want to change things? And by that, I mean, is it really that bad to want to build someone else's vision, get really good at executing stuff, and just kind of enjoy the craft of making software. Like, I know that that's not okay for you and it's not okay for me, but is it really not okay for anyone?
Yeah, that's all right. So, for example, some people say, I just want a 9 to 5 job. I enjoy coding. And as long as I have something interesting to code, I'm happy with it. So you need to decide what makes you happy. And then you choose the files you want to pick. And that's what I say in the book. What I share is my story mainly there and things that I wish my younger version knew. So my younger version would avoid some of the challenges I had. But one of the things I learned in Brazil, I remember one director told me, like, you drive many chains and sometimes you expect too much from people to act like you. But he said, not everyone wants to lead. Some people, they just want to follow and it's fine for them. And I learned this. And it is about making transparent when you're talking to people saying, like, do you want to lead the chain? Because that means for sure some frustration. You are going to learn that some things didn't work as expected and you will have to swallow the bitter taste of failure. And maybe you don't want that. You just want, I go to my job, I do my things, and it's fine for me. If it's fine for you, then it's fine for you. You don't have to go through all of that. For me, I enjoy seeing the change and seeing the teams become better and creating value faster and making something that makes the world a little bit better. So I enjoy this. But that's me. It doesn't mean it's everyone.
No, here, and me too. But again, never going to judge anyone else for wanting to do different things or not wanting to do different things. Right, so before we wrap up, I would like to ask you for one piece of super actionable advice. So anyone that's sitting out there now thinking, hey, I'm trapped in bullshit product management and this sounds just like me. Now, obviously, they can go and buy your book in a day or two. But what's one thing that they can do concretely today, like one step that they can take today?
One step they can take today is to start asking more questions than giving answers. So someone comes to you and say, hey, can you do that for me? And you say, yeah, I can do it for you. No, start saying, what do you need that for? How does this help you? What does success look like? So I say that good product managers ask 10 times more questions than you give answer. But the thing is, this is a bit not so intuitive because most people expect you to give them answers as fast as possible. In Brazil, I was told the faster you give a solution to somebody, the better and the more valuable you are. Today, I actually think the sharper the question, the more valuable you become. So ask more questions.
No, absolutely. Well, I'm definitely up for asking questions as we've proved tonight, but hopefully some of these people will listen to that and be inspired to ask some questions of their own. But where can people find you after this if they want to ask you questions about your book, chat about their own personal brand of bullshit, or maybe even snag a guitar lesson or heavy metal recommendation?
Sure. You can find me on my website, d-pereira.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn, my newsletter, and drop me a message there. We can exchange.
Cool. Well, I'll make sure to link that all into the show notes, and then hopefully you get a few people heading in your direction and throw in some shapes. Well, that's been a fantastic chat. So obviously, thanks for coming back on. It's been a while, but it's good to get you back. Good to have a chat. Obviously, wish you all the best of luck with the book. But yeah, as for now, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.